Hey everybody, Matt Bell with Electric Violin Shop. One of the most common questions we get from people that are just getting started with amplified violin or it's their first time picking up an electric is, yeah, this is cool, but how do I make it sound good? Because when I first plug it in, it didn't sound good. Yeah, and I'm not terribly surprised that it doesn't sound good. The first time you picked up your acoustic violin, it didn't sound good. I hope it didn't, or you're going to make me feel really bad. So you got to understand electric violin is a different instrument than acoustic violin. Very, very similar, but not exactly the same. It's not just plug and play. I wouldn't order an electric violin and play a big concert with it 3 days later, having never played amplified violin before. It will take a minute. It's not just plug and play. Electric guitar players, for the most part, do not take an electric guitar, a cable, and plug directly into the board. They don't do it. Nile Rodgers being a notable exception to that. So why are electric violinists always shocked when they take their violin, plug it directly into a soundboard, and they're like, yeah, this doesn't sound good. I expected it to sound just like my $30,000 acoustic. Nope, that's not how this works. Electric guitar players generally take their instrument, plug it into some pedals, plug it into an amp, and then it sounds good. That's more or less the same situation for us too. So what are some of the most common mistakes that people make when they first start playing amplified violin? Bad gear choices, which could be an impedance mismatch. It could be some gain staging problems. We'll talk about each one of those. Bad technique, probably the most common bad technique when you're trying to transfer skills from an acoustic to an electric is that we dig in too hard. And we'll talk about that too. The next thing with effects is trying to do too much, using all these different effects without understanding what each one of them does and how they stack on top of each other. The converse is trying to do too little. I'm just going to play this the same way I play my acoustic, or I'm just going to use the factory presets, or I'm not going to use any reverb, and I just expect it to sound amazing. So those are sort of the most common mistakes. Let's dig in. Impedance is a key characteristic of electrical signals. We can think of this as pressure, how much strength a signal has to push its way through a circuit, and it's the opposite. A high impedance is a low pressure. Electric violins have very, very high impedance compared to most other electric instruments. Most of our gear is for electric guitars, so violin with a very high impedance or low pressure, electric guitar with a lower impedance or a higher pressure. The gear is expecting our signal to be pushing harder than it is. And since it's not pushing as hard, we can sometimes end up with what they call an impedance mismatch. An impedance mismatch is going to mean that not all of your signal is going to get through. It's going to sound weak. It's not going to be good. The cure for this is either a preamp or a buffered pedal as your first pedal, or a wireless gear, a wireless system that has a high enough impedance that it's going to match your instrument. So we got to make sure that the very first thing that we plug into, whether it's a wireless or a buffered pedal or a preamp, is ready to accept that high impedance or that low pressure signal. Now, if you want to know if you have an impedance mismatch, I've got a video for you here where I'm plugging into my Helix and I'm adjusting the input impedance of the Helix itself. That's one of the features in there. And I'm able to simulate an impedance mismatch for you. So you can hear what it sounds like if I've got a violin and I'm plugging into a low impedance circuit that's not ready for that instrument. The very first thing you'll hear is my full signal, 1 mega ohm of impedance. And then you're going to hear super low impedance, and it'll be real different. And then sort of stepping up through, and you'll be able to hear what it sounds like when we've got an impedance problem. And then you'll know, oh gosh, that sounds really familiar. I probably have an impedance mismatch. that helps you hear what an impedance mismatch sounds like. If that's a familiar sound for you, you probably need to change something in your signal chain. So the next problem that people will have, it's called gain staging. And what gain staging means is that every component in your signal chain, think about the signal leaving your violin through the wire. Think about it like it's water flowing through a pipe. So it comes out of your violin through that cable into the first pedal that it hits, and then to the next pedal, to the next, and then to the amplifier. That is your signal chain. Each component on that chain has an expectation, and it's expecting a range of signal strength. And this isn't impedance anymore, this is volume. So if I'm sending too low a signal, because every component has noise, every electrical component has some noise. If here's the noise level in that component, and here's my signal level coming in, well, I've got almost as much noise as I've got signal, so it's going to be real hissy and bad. If I'm sending more signal, then it's going to drown out that noise, right? And it's going to sound better and fuller and more complete. However, if I send too much, then it's going to clip and it's going to distort. So we got to find the Goldilocks moment where we get just right to feed this first one, and then it's generally going to have an output volume on it. We've got to get that volume set to where we don't starve or overdrive the next pedal and subsequently through our signal chain. So we talked about starving, we talked about overdriving, and I'm going to let you hear an example of both of those things. And a warning, I'm wearing a different shirt. This is what an overdriving sound would sound like. See, it's not too bad by itself, but on double stops, you can really hear it. If you're hearing a lot of this sound right here, you could have a starving problem. So yeah, I actually own 2 shirts. Amazing. So you got to make sure that you've got your gain staging set properly through your system. And it's not really a matter of using meters. It's a matter of using your ears to make sure that you're trying to get those pedals set to where each one is receiving the appropriate level of signal. Failure to do that right is a very common mistake for people that are getting started. The next thing we got to talk about is keeping realistic expectations. Your electric violin is not going to sound like your acoustic violin. It's not. They're 2 different instruments. A screwdriver is never going to work like a hammer. They're just different tools for different jobs. And nobody gets mad at a screwdriver because it's bad at pounding nails. And you don't get mad at a hammer because it's not good at turning screws. They're just different. So that's how we've got to look at acoustic violins and electric violins. They're different tools for different jobs, and we have to think about them in different ways. Now, there are a couple of tricks to make your electric sound more like an acoustic, but in general, try to think of this the way a sculptor thinks about a piece of stone, that I can chip things away to get to what's inside of it. But I can't start with a stone that's this big and end up with a sculpture that's this big. Those aren't realistic expectations, right? The next thing, don't try to do too much. Don't try to I'm going to do compression and EQ and this and this and this and this. And I'm trying to go stereo with all my choruses and all that. If you're new to this, keep it simple. We'll try to get some success in the simple things, and then bit by bit, we will add onto it. Just like when you started playing the violin, you didn't start with Paganini. You started with Twinkle and Lightly Row, right? So start simple and work your way up. Learning how to manage this instrument is a lot like learning to manage your last instrument. And don't necessarily get overwhelmed by the advice you see on the internet. You've got to have a preamp, and you got to have chorus, and you got to have reverb, and you got to have delay. I don't need all these pedals to get started. I have all these pedals. Listen, I like them. I use them, but I've been at this a while. So at first, don't try to do too much. That's going to be a road to failure. The other road to failure is not making any adjustments at all to your technique. You're probably going to have to change your technique to play your electric violin. Your teacher, when you're standing on a big stage in a concert hall, trying to get you to fill that whole arena, Your teacher's telling you to play inside the string, get into it, use the weight of your arm to pull the sound out of the instrument. Remember all these discussions? Electrics are not like that. We don't demand the sound out of an electric, we just ask nicely. So lighten up your right arm. That's going to help reduce scratch. It's going to reduce some of this grindy sound that you get if you're trying to play it the same way you play your guarneri, because I know you've got a guarneri. Of course you do. Everybody's got, I've got 3 of them. So don't try to do too little. You are going to have to adjust your technique a little bit. And I want you to hear this video where I'm going to play an electric the same way you would play an acoustic on a contralto. I'm going to dig in pretty hard and you're going to hear why you shouldn't do that. This is what it sounds like when you dig in too hard and you're trying to play one of these like you would play an acoustic. Not good. I'm right. It's not good. All right. So trying to do too little, experiment with your technique first. If you hear something you don't like on your electric rig, don't reach for a knob first. Experiment with technique first. We got to remember that we actually play an instrument. And if you're practicing your acoustic and you hear a sound that you don't like, there's not any knobs to turn. It's these, right? So do the same thing with your electric. Adjust your technique, then start messing with your gear. So that's a very, very common mistake for people that are new. They think, oh, I've got these knobs. I should turn these knobs. Figure out how to play the instrument first. Then we'll think about the knobs. Another very common mistake that people make when they've got a multi-effects pedal, they go, oh, it's got 90 factory presets in here. Certainly one of these is going to be good for violin. No, they're not even good for guitars, and that's who they're made for. Very few guitar players find a factory preset and go, oh, that's just the tone I've been looking for my whole life. Most people go, close-ish, and I can work with this and adjust it a lot. For violinists, they're not made for us. I generally start with a completely empty preset, no effects in it whatsoever, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of reverb, and then we try to make the instrument make the sound we want, and then we start turning knobs past that. I got good news for you. You're going to spend the rest of your life, maybe it's bad news for you, but you're going to spend the rest of your life chasing down tones, and you're going to find one, and you're going to get this tone. These settings are perfect. Hallelujah, we figured it out. And you're going to be ecstatic for like 3 months. And then you're going to be like, ah, man, I just wish it had a little bit more whatever. And then you're going to find that perfect tone again, and it's going to be different. And you're going to spend the next 3 months basking in that. And it's the rest of your life you're going to spend doing this. And it's fun. It really is fun. So enjoy this. Be patient with yourself. Find a reference. Find some other electric violinists that are making tones that you like and sort of use that as a guide. Don't try to say, oh, I want to sound exactly like Chuck Bontrager. You can't sound like Chuck Bontrager. You're not Chuck Bontrager. So you're going to sound like you, but if you can use his tone as a guide, I want to work in that direction, that's going to be helpful for you. So at least you've got a target to shoot for. As always, appreciate you guys hanging out. Please subscribe to our channel. Check out some other videos that we've got, and we'll catch you guys next time.